Hello, welcome everyone. I'm Dick Deming. I'm Medical Director of Mercy One Cancer Center, and I'm the founder of Above and Beyond Cancer. Welcome to our weekly cancer education series. It's brought to you in part by a grant from the Rosalie and Sherry X-Line Ziegler Fund. And tonight, my guest is Kristin Wiedenfeld. Welcome, Kristen.
Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
And tonight we're going to talk about loss and grief, and even more importantly, finding meaning.
Okay.
So, Kristen, we're going to talk about her husband, Gary, and Gary's cancer journey. And Gary died of a glioblastoma. And from the ashes of his death has come a wonderful event. And we'll talk about that, Gary's ride. But I kind of want to get to know you and talk about the experience you went through as the wife of someone going through a cancer journey. And then we're going to focus on, what happens after death, the appropriate grief, but then, how does one in a healthy way survive and thrive even after losing the love of your life?
Okay.
So let's meet you first. So where were you born, Kristen?
I was born in Iowa City in the hospital, but
Iowa City,
yes,
okay.
but born and raised in Afton, Iowa for a lot of my years.
So how big's Afton?
Well, it is about, if I say 1,000, and if anybody's watching this who grew up around that area, and I'm not correct, forgive me, but about 1,000 people.
About 1,000.
And maybe 800 to 1,000.
Did it have more than one grade school building?
That time years ago, we had several grade schools, but they were in different towns.
Oh,
so you were bused.
But in Afton itself?
But Afton itself, we just had a school that encompassed your high school, your junior high, etc. So.
Gotcha. And what did mom and dad do in Afton?
My dad was the principal.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So we behaved.
And mom, did she work outside the home?
She worked at the home raising 5 kids.
5 kids.
Yes.
And where were you in the birth order?
I was the second to the oldest.
Okay, great. And what did you end up going to high school in Afton?
No, my dad got a new job as a principal in Sheraton, Iowa.
Okay.
So the end of my freshman year.
Big city
of Sheraton, yes, where the Hy-Vee headquarters used to be.
Yes.
And yes. So, but we moved there at the end of my freshman year, and then I graduated high school there.
Okay. What was your claim to fame in high school in Sheraton?
Claim to fame. Oh my gosh. I would say sports, and then also being involved with a lot of the extracurricular, being involved in student council.
Okay.
I was vice president of student council there. So it was wonderful.
And what was your best sport?
Basketball.
Okay. And that
and
was,
running too.
And was that when it was 6-person teams?
Yes.
Yeah.
So 3
so
on
were you
3s.
offense or defense?
I was a forward. So, which is good because then
meaning you got to shoot baskets.
I got to shoot the baskets.
So,
yes.
So were you like a Caitlin Clark sort of player?
No.
Oh, okay.
I don't think anybody can be like her.
And they didn't. I don't think they had 3-point shots back then, did they?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
That's thinking back a long time ago, but I don't think so.
Did you ever make it to the state tournament?
Not when I was there.
Okay.
No.
And then what did you do when you graduated from high school?
Went to Wartburg for 2 years. And then went to the University of Iowa.
What did you study in college?
It was I first was going to go into nursing, decided that was not going to come to fruition. So then
was that organic chemistry perhaps? Or
anything. I was a science major though, but that was when you got to the chemistries, the different types of chemistry it was challenging, but it was mostly because I literally could not give somebody a shot.
Oh, okay.
I would sweat profusely and I just couldn't do it. I can get them, but just giving one just was not the best.
So then you switched from nursing to?
I just wanted to BS in general science.
Okay.
So I should say but you were in with all the pre-meds, the pre-dents, pre-pharmacy, everybody. So it's not like you sloughed off.
And when did you and Gary meet?
We didn't meet until way after
college.
Way after college.
Okay, well, let's stick with your story then.
Okay, yeah.
What was your first job out of college?
My first job out of college, I worked actually as a waitress. So that was my first job. And then I got into into Parks and Recreation, into the city, worked as a
Okay.
secretary.
In Iowa City?
No, in Grinnell, Iowa.
In Grinnell.
Mhm,
Okay.
mhm.
So you
Yes.
worked as a secretary,
As a
in
secretary, yeah,
Grinnell.
yeah.
Okay. And then at what point did your life and Gary's life intersect?
Not until I was married first, and then I had a child from our first marriage,
Okay.
and so I was a single mom for quite some time. Because when I left University of Iowa, I had not completed yet my degree, so I completed it when I was in Grinnell, and knew I wanted to go kind of into pharmaceutical, and so I had to get some type of sales job. So I ended up going to Omaha and getting into sales, and then coming back to Des Moines. And when I got back to Des Moines, my sister at that time, because I was single parent for, gosh, it was 13 years, she was like, okay, Kristen, she was a spinning class instructor. And she very good at what she does. And she's also very much a protector. And so she's like, Kristen, I'm so tired of you meeting losers. I want you to come to my class. I've got 3 options for you. We'll see how things go.
Is this an older sister or a younger
This is
sister?
my older sister,
Your
Catherine.
older sister.
I love her. I love her to death. She's very good at picking out good
Now
men because she's got a good
Now, was she
husband.
like a full-time spin instructor, or
Yes.
that was a fun off-site job, or did she have another job?
No, she was an
Full-time
instructor.
fitness.
Yeah,
Full-time
yeah,
fitness.
yeah.
Okay.
Besides
So
being a
she
mom,
already had picked out 3
options
for
yes.
you to
Yes,
interview
yeah.
during spin class.
Well, if I wanted to interview them, yes, but we wanted to see who
Could
kind
you
of
see them? Okay.
who would take.
Were they all 3 in the same spin class at the same time?
No, 2 out of the 3 were though.
Okay.
From what Catherine, my sister, said.
Okay.
So I get in there though, and I guess when you're single, bless single people's hearts, you get matched up with a lot
How
of
many
different
times
people.
did you change clothes before going to that spin class?
None.
Okay.
I'm not one that
Okay.
puts on makeup or
Okay.
you throw on the clothes, and if they like you for you,
Okay.
great, and if they don't, well,
Great.
then it's not meant to be.
Okay.
So I just threw on some clothes that you go to spinning class with, and I went in there, and Catherine's like, hey everybody, I want you to meet my sister Kristen, and so out of the corner of my eye, I see this guy get up off of his bike, and there was an empty bike next to me, and so he sits by me, and I'm thinking, wonder which option this one is, So I talked to him throughout the whole entire class, poor thing. But so he ended up asking me on a date.
I hate it when people talk all the way through my spin class.
I know. When I get uncomfortable, sometimes I talk, and so he's probably like, "Oh."
Okay. So
no.
is this the one? Or
He was the one. He was actually option
This is Gary.
A. So this is Gary. This is
So
Gary.
not he came up and actually came over
And sat
said
beside me.
hello.
Yeah.
So that was where you first met. Well,
Yeah.
that's really
Yeah.
appropriate.
Yeah.
That's your first meeting.
Yeah. And it was
at a spin class.
just meant to be, and it was just meant to be. So
Great. And then how many years after that meeting in spin class before you guys got married?
1998, and we got married in 2000.
Okay. So 2 years later. And was it a mixed family then? Did you have children? And
I
he
had one,
children?
and he did not from his
Okay.
previous marriage. So
Okay.
we just had Nick.
Great. And then what was your where did you live during your married life? How many years were you married?
We were married for 21 years almost.
Okay.
Not quite. He didn't quite make it to the 21. So, but I knew him for 23.
Okay.
Yeah.
And your first you got married in the Des Moines area?
We got married actually in Sedona, Arizona.
Okay. But you were living in the Des Moines area?
We were living in the Des Moines area.
So a destination wedding.
Destination wedding, but it was just he and I. That was, and then Nick, our son was, what do you call him? He was everything. He was a chauffeur.
He was a
photographer.
chauffeur, best man,
bridesmaid,
maid of
everything,
honor, flower girl. He was everything.
Everything.
He was the witness.
So yes, he was the witness. So
Okay.
bless his little heart. So it was just.
And he was
us
how
3.
old?
He was 16.
He
at
was
that
16,
time.
and your son.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that was
So
great.
it was a beautiful,
bonding
yeah.
to have him be there.
It
for
was a
your
good
wedding.
experience for all, and I think that made him feel very special too. It made Nick feel very special,
Mhm.
which is good. So yeah.
And then in your careers, so you started off in Des Moines, and from our conversations, I know you've lived in other parts of the country,
Mhm.
right?
Yes, lived in Des Moines. Then we went to Salt Lake City. I got into pharmaceutical sales. That was in Omaha. And then when I moved to Des Moines, I still was in pharmaceutical sales. Gary was in sales for a printing and a packaging, printing company. It used to be called Expedex, which is now called Veritiv.
So you have two extrovert salespeople.
Yes.
Together. Okay.
Yes. Yes. So he basically had an offer to go to Salt Lake City. Because once Nick graduated, we thought we're going to go do something. We're empty nesters now. Let's just go explore. So we thought, okay, well, our thought was we're going to end up in Colorado because Gary very much likes the mountains. But his friend who he used to work with called and said, hey, I got this deal for you. Why don't you just come check it out in Salt Lake City? It's with with this company. And so we went there and fell in love with Salt Lake City because it's so different than Denver. It's just beautiful. The mountains are smack dab right on top of you. Yeah. And it's just beautiful. And so he accepted the offer. So we lived there for 13 years in a little suburb called Sandy, which is just south of the downtown.
Right near Little Cottonwood Canyon.
We're near all the canyons. So literally, if you ever ski, people loved coming there because you're literally 5-10 minutes from your skiing destination. And that's it, so you could get in this fresh powder that they always talked about and you could just ski away and have just fun. But it was still great in the summertime when there's no snow because there's just a lot of hiking opportunities. And you have from the north to the south of the state, you have 5 different national parks and it's so different from the north to the south. And it's really quite magical.
So how would you describe your life together in Utah?
Very adventurous. He was the one that said, Kristen, come on, we're going, and I'm like, oh, what are we doing? Because he would like to do, he got me into mountain biking, or we would do certain hikes that we'd be on edges, and I'm not a fan of being on edges, so he would always take me past my comfort zone, which was good because I got to experience and do a lot of things. But we were always going and seeing. And doing.
Right. So very active, skiing and biking and hiking.
We didn't ski. I don't ski, so I always call it my bum left knee. And then Gary, with him being on blood thinners because he has a mechanical aortic valve, that was one thing that he chose not to do just in case if he would crash and burn and bleed.
And how long had he had an aortic valve?
He had that done when he was 29 years old.
Oh, okay.
So he had been on Coumadin since he was 29 for a long, long time. And so he had that aortic valve that
for the most part didn't slow him down.
Did not slow him down.
Mountain
biking, basketball, volleyball, softball, just everything. He just loved it.
Where did Gary grow up?
He grew up in Fort Dodge, Iowa.
So high school in Fort Dodge.
He went to St. Edmunds.
Okay.
A Catholic school.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he was also a Hawkeye?
He was also a Hawkeye, yeah.
But you didn't meet till spin class.
No.
Okay.
He and I lived very close to one another. And I'm sure my very last year at the University of Iowa, he was there probably his freshman year. And our paths probably crossed. But I always told him, I don't think I would have liked you if we ever met, because he was, let's say he was a boy, and boys like to just have, he liked to have a lot of fun that I don't think a lot of beer drinking and all that stuff, and blah, blah, blah. But he was a good guy.
So let's talk a bit about Gary's illness.
Okay.
So what were the first symptoms that Gary had that ultimately led to the discovery of his brain tumor?
This was in the year of 2020. You guys remember what all happened? We had the pandemic hit. And Gary was so excited because he was going to officially retire the 1st of February. So we had the pandemic, February coming. And then, of course, he was finances, investments and stuff like that. It was a little bit of a rocky situation going on with that. And he started to just come to me and say, Kristen, I'm just having a hard time figuring out these words. I should know these words. They're simple words like, for, just simple words. And I just can't figure them out. And it got to the point where something was not right to him. So he went to his internal medicine doctor, just thinking it was just stress. I've retired, the stock market's fluctuating, the pandemic's going on. Nobody knows, what to do. And, so he just went in with that intention to see, was it stress, or anything related to that,
right.
that would cause
the
that.
Doctor said, those symptoms, we better get a scan.
he said, yeah, because he went through all the blood testing, anything that would eliminate his symptoms. And he said, let's just do this MRI because we just want to rule anything out. And that's when they came back and they found that, you know what, Gary, unfortunately, here's what you have. And it's not just a.
So do you remember where you guys were when you learned the results of the MRI?
We were both at home. And they called, and it was a big, big blow.
Was it a doctor they called or a nurse they called?
It was his doctor's internal medicine doctor called him. And he said, you need to get seen. You need, here's what I would recommend you to do, but you need to get seen quickly.
Okay.
So.
And then talk a little bit about that first week of seeing the neurosurgeon, the radiation doc, the chemo doc. What do you remember, or just what were you and Gary going through? Tell me a bit about your emotions together. I would assume you were together on all of those appointments.
Oh, yes. Yes. I was definitely allowed to go in because at that time you couldn't go in to clinics with your
because of COVID.
Because of COVID.
But you insisted, yes.
Because he couldn't read things.
Yes.
It got to the point where he could not read them. And
he couldn't fill out the forms.
He would not know what he was reading. He could sign. He was able to text things. He could do things, but whatever came in, he couldn't get that part.
So did he get started on some medicine like dexamethasone that cleared up his symptoms before surgery so that you guys could have in-depth conversations, or were you still no
because they told us here's what you have. I think it was like a Thursday or a Friday. We immediately went in that next day to see one of the physicians here, but at that point they say we really can't do the surgery. And so he said, well, let's see what your insurance, where you can go because of your insurance. So we had the option either going to Iowa City or to Mayo to do surgery. So we chose to go to Iowa City. So then we were just kind of handed over to Iowa City to go through everything, the workup in regards to seeing all the people that you're going to see to help determine what's the route that you're going to do.
And as you were going through all of this, Gary, it was still difficult for Gary to communicate?
He could communicate, but basically if people talked, if they started talking fast, he had a hard time with that. But he could understand you.
And he.
We could, yeah. Oh, yes. We talked about
the fear
everything.
Of what was you're facing.
Yeah. He's the type where he's got this incredible faith and he's got this incredible strength and perseverance that, I've never seen him cry, but when he first found out about that, we both cried, but he literally cried because it literally is a death sentence and there's nothing you can do about it, but then he's me like, and this is just him. What can we do? Bring it on. Let's go do it. And so I'm the researcher. I get on and type and get all this stuff and pull it out. And I said, okay, here's our options, and he's like, whatever it is, whatever we've got, let's go. But when we went into the physician, we said, okay, if we don't do surgery, how much time are we looking at? And that's a guesstimate, for a clinician saying, oh, well, hey, but he said, if you don't do surgery or anything, you have approximately 3 to 4 months. So we knew that, forget it, that's not an option. So what options are we going to do?
So you had surgery.
Had surgery.
At the University of Iowa. And how did that go?
I could not go in. So that, like I said, this is a time where you couldn't go in there to surgery. So he had to go in there by himself, had to sign things that he didn't know what he was signing, unfortunately. But he made it through surgery because with him, since he's on blood thinners, it's kind of we have to prep him, to thicken up his blood, but you can't get it too thick, nor can you get it too thin. So we have to walk that fine line. But he went through surgery, came out okay.
When was the first time you got to see him after surgery?
I didn't get to see him.
Till he got discharged from the hospital?
Pretty much until he got discharged from the hospital.
How many days was that approximately?
He went in, that was 3 or 4 days, I think, the first surgery. I think 3 days, I think.
And were you communicating by cell phone?
Yes.
Was he able to speak okay?
Yeah, he came out of that pretty good. Nothing else changed, which was wonderful because his was on his left, it was on his parietal lobe. So that's basically where all the thinking and the rationalization, what you understand and what you can speak, et cetera, happens. So he could he could definitely communicate. He didn't lose any of his speech. He didn't lose anything else after his first surgery.
Did he regain?
He did not know.
No. So he always then had a bit of a deficit with finding
ability
the right
to-
word.
His ability to sometimes understand what you've said, so he can basically, if you ask me how I'm doing, I would say, oh, I'm doing fine. Well, he may hear it, but he'd say, hey, let's go outdoors. So sometimes he had a hard time understanding what you were saying, but the majority of the time you'd never know.
Okay. So he got out of the hospital
Yeah.
and he came through the surgery well.
Yes.
And then there was radiation and oral chemotherapy.
There's radiation and chemotherapy. So his surgery, they had what was done, which is the best type of surgery you can have. So he had what they call a gross resection. So the physician got as much as they could visually see.
Possible.
So that was a plus on the bell curve. Then the second one, he was able to do radiation, and he did it all, because a lot of people can't get through that radiation, or they choose not to do radiation, because it's a pretty intense little setup for radiation.
6 weeks of radiation with some oral
along with oral chemotherapy, and he got through that, and it's an oral form. So for him, he didn't have as many of the side effects as you would have if you do it IV related, but he still had side effects, but they gave him some anti-nausea medications and he was fine. He really did quite well on that.
And as he was going through the radiation, was he getting back to his normal physical activity, going out on his bike or spin class? Or
he loves to bike, so his goal was when the doc says I'm okay, you can start getting up and going, he was going to do it. And because he was going out for walks, we made sure he did physical activity of some sort. It was usually walk, so he could, keep that leg strength going, or, be able to get to that point to where he could get back on his bike. And that's what he did. That was his goal. If I can get if I get that okay from Dr. Colletier, who is his radiation oncologist, he's like, okay, I'm doing it. And so he did. He just made little goals.
And then as he got done with the radiation, did he do then 6 months more of the oral chemotherapy?
Yep, we did. First, we had a holiday where you didn't have anything, to where we could just be, to where he could feel kind of normal in a sense. And then he started his second round of chemo, along with what's called an Optune device that he wore on his head. It's just electric fields, and they look kind of like these big, huge Band-Aids and with these EKG pads all over them.
Yeah. And it's connected to a battery.
It
sends an electrical
frequency
field through the tumor. And it has been shown to help reduce or slow down the recurrence of glioblastoma tumors.
They say because you have to wear this to make it the most efficacious for that device, from all the people that have utilized it. You have to wear it 18 hours. It has to be on for 18 hours of the 24, and a minimum of 4 months. That's going to be the best.
I think we got some pictures here.
Yeah, he's got his little. There it is.
So that's
the back part of it.
Is that you putting it on?
We had one of their experts come over to show me how to do things. And then after she showed me how to do it, then I did it all.
Yep. So depending on where the tumor is, where those little electrode patches, but they basically a little round white, they totally cover the scalp. And then each one has a little cord that comes together, and then it's attached to a battery pack that is, about the size.
It's like you're wearing a backpack.
Yeah.
Literally. It's like a backpack.
It's like a big pack of Oreo cookies, sort of that size as the battery. And then
he wished it was Oreo cookies.
So let's look at some other pictures here.
But yeah, that's
So then where are we here? Does he have the Optune on there?
No, because you can get a little bit of a little break from that. So he would sleep with his Optune device, because he got the majority of that used while he was sleeping. So he could have at least 6 hours of free time during the day. And you want to air it out, because if you don't, you tend to get these little lesions and things on your head.
It irritates the skin.
Yes, totally irritates the skin.
Are those grandchildren?
Those are our grandchildren.
So are those Nick's kids?
So
it looks like 3 little grandchildren there. Let's go back to. So who do you have there?
So the tallest is Gary, obviously, the no hair. And then I'm the next to the tallest, which is not saying much.
I did recognize you and Gary, yes.
Okay. And then the kids that to the far left, the one is that's Theo, that's a little boy. And then the middle one is Miss Lenny, and then that's Ellie, that's right beside in front of me.
Okay.
So.
And does Nick and the grandchildren live?
They live in West Des Moines.
Oh, so that's nice to have them as a source of joy going through the treatment. So then Gary went through all 6 months of the chemo?
He went through 6 months of the chemo, not at the highest dose, because the highest dose did make him nauseated. He just couldn't do it. So he got to the second highest dose, which is still, I mean, at least got through the 6 months of that. And then that was it, because they basically say that after your second round, there's really not enough data to show there's.
And then when did you first learn that the cancer was coming back? Was it because of symptoms, or was it because it showed up on a scan?
It showed up on a scan, but he was complaining of headaches again. And so he was taking increasing numbers of Tylenols, 500 milligrams. So he didn't say anything. He never would. He's just not the man to say, something's wrong. But we went through because you get a scan every 3 months. And so we did a scan in March. It would have been in March of 2021. And it came back with another tumor, big tumor in his frontal lobe.
Okay.
So.
And then at the point that it came back, and you've already stated that you knew from the very beginning that this was a tumor that could be treated but was not curable. So get your team together, proceed with hope and optimism. Tell me a little bit about what it felt when you saw, okay, now it's come back.
You recognize it. I don't know if he really grieved, because he kind of grieved along the whole route, because the end is coming. But it's like, okay, he had a great result. The first surgery is like, let's do this. I want to do this. If this gives me more time, let's go and let's do this. So there was really no hesitation on that.
So there was a second surgery.
There was a second surgery.
Okay.
And that didn't go so well.
Okay. And there were some complications from the second surgery?
He had, the tumor was on both hemispheres, so his left, and it went into his right. So the doctor said he would absolutely not touch the right side, because you would lose a lot of his capabilities. So he got out what he could on the left part. And he came to me and said, and that was still during COVID, but at least I was able to come in, but not, at least in the hospital. But he came out and said that I don't know if Gary's going to be able to speak once he gets done with his surgery, coming out of surgery, because of where it was positioned. And goes, so I just want to let you know this, so there's that possibility. So I was devastated hearing that, because for not being able to read, and then if he wasn't able to speak, what do you do? So when I got to see him rolling down the hallway, and they said, Kristen, he's here. We're going to take him back to the room. My first thing was to the nurse, has he said anything? Has he said anything? She goes, he's just been talking and talking and talking. So I'm like, yay, because that was just a huge yay, because that was just something, no matter how much time was left, I just didn't want him to lose any more capabilities, that he could be able to communicate with somebody, and to have that joy, to have that part of that. So that was a big, huge relief off of that. But from that,
so did you get to stay in the hospital, see him in the room, or
no, they had to be
out because of COVID?
Scurried out. But at least I got to come back at certain hours. They had certain hours that you could go, and definitely took advantage of that. Otherwise, you just communicated. You could still phone. You could still do that. He could still figure out how to dial and do that. And then we were going to come home, but he ended, and we came home. But because of, once again, the Coumadin, that, the bleeding, he ended up having a pretty massive brain hemorrhage. So we went into the emergency department, and that's when he went into the ICU. Things just kind of went downhill from there. They were able to stabilize that, to get that shut off. But he lost, and it could be just because of the tumor too, because it just grows so rapidly that he lost a lot of his ability of strength and his coordination. So he would fall. And
Was he able to get out of the hospital after
he was
that
able to get out of the
hemorrhage
yep, he were
and
able to
come home?
and come home.
Okay.
And which was good. And so he came home with a walker because he had the instability. But he, like I said, he would fall. He didn't want to use the walker. And with the second surgery, there was definitely noticeable changes with his behavior. And I don't know if looking back on it, it's because he just couldn't express what was going on, but a little bit more combative, or like he didn't want to use the walker because, he wanted to try to do things on his own. And it was just harder for him.
How was your ability to communicate with each other? And
it was harder because I didn't correlate his change of behavior related to cancer. It was not, the cancer was causing it versus he was being part of that behavior change because he was just so frustrated.
And at this point, were there still lots of decisions that you needed to make together as a couple, what you wanted to do? Did you have...
I pretty much made the decisions. We still talked about him because he's still a part of this. No matter what, I always talk to him about it. We need to get you stronger, Gary, because you don't have that stability. We need to make sure you get that strength so you can stay at home longer. Here's some options. What do you want to do? Well, it was hard for him to really say, here's what I want to do. I said, do you want to go get your legs? You do want to get him stronger? Yes. He could definitely do yes or no and things like that. So we got him into a Yonkers rehab thinking, well, that would help strengthen so he could stay home. I think they were great at what they did. They're a wonderful, wonderful rehab. However, I think because of his aggressiveness of his cancer, his weakness was caused from the cancer. And I don't think that's something that you can get stronger from. You can't get your muscles stronger from because the cancer is taking away some of your physical abilities. But he went through that, came back home, was home with home health care for a little while, and we still had issues with we just had issues physically, and it got to the point where just things started just to deteriorate
It's
more.
difficult, and Gary's a big man.
He's a very big man.
He's
not fat or heavy, but he's just a tall guy,
tall
and very lean and dense.
and if you're not able to support your own weight, and even trying to care for someone in home, there's a lot of physical
things
that needs to be done to care for someone who's not totally able to.
It's trying to get him in and out of bed. And it got to the point where, even trying to get him to the restroom, we got to the point where we couldn't get to the restroom. We had to put a little commode basically by the bed. And you'd literally have to hoist up and turn. And then hopefully you got him on there and he wouldn't fall, because we had several instances. We just almost didn't make it and disaster could have happened. So there is a lot there's a lot to take on.
So at that point, you had hospice home care was helping you in the home?
It was pretty much me. And they did have the opportunities though were, and this is, I think is good for caregivers, they have to have time to regroup so you can really concentrate on your loved one, because it does take a lot of physical and mental strength out of you. And no matter how much you want to do it on your own, you've got to take reprieve for yourself, because otherwise you can't help your loved one. So they were good about having volunteers come and stay with Gary, and so I could have a night's sleep. And so I could wake back up and be able to do what I needed to do.
And then at what point did you decide that it was time for Gary to go into the hospice facility?
To go into the house?
End of life care.
It was to the point where I couldn't get him back. I couldn't get him back into bed hardly. I couldn't lift him up. I couldn't physically take care of him. And I knew at that point I wanted to be with him just for him, not being a caregiver, for him. I wanted to be with him. So, and plus that night, that we were having such challenges, I just said, Jim, I can't do this anymore, Gary. I just can't do this. I need some help. And so that next morning, literally, that's when he didn't wake up. That was the time where he lost pretty much consciousness. And so at that point, I knew it was good to say, let's go to a facility that can provide him that care, to roll him, to sponge him, to help him get through those physical changes that happen towards the end of life. So I could just literally sit by him, and that's what we did.
So then you transitioned to Taylor Hospice.
Yeah.
And how long was Gary
He went
there?
in on a Friday and he passed on a Monday.
Okay. And just talk a little bit about your interactions with Gary while he was there at the hospice facility.
If you never go through that, you don't know how to interact with your loved one who's passing away. What do you say? Or do you say anything? Do you bring people in? Do you not? What do you do? And I will say that the hospice nurses that were there were exceptionally good at saying, Kristen, it's okay to sit in there and talk to him about everything that, because they hear you. They can hear you. They know, and what's going on. They just obviously can't react. But to carry on conversations like you normally would every day, to bring in music that they enjoy, to have massages if they want to have massages, to have this beautiful spa bath that they do, to help soothe.
And at this point with hospice, were friends and relatives able to come in to say
goodbye?
We
were still in COVID. So we had restrictions, but we set up one day to where we could have people come in, and we could only have so many people at a time, but at least they were allowed in. So, and then family, the direct family, like his brother and our son, Nick, and then his brother's wife we were able to all be in that room, so that at least COVID didn't prevent us not being able to say goodbye to him. So that was a blessing that at least it wasn't as strict then as it was.
And were you with him when he passed?
Yes. Yeah. Literally, yeah. I had my fingers, because I could tell they go through certain breathing, when they're going to breathe their last breaths. And I just
Although sometimes there's a breath and you're not sure.
And you're not sure, but I just put my little hand on his carotid, and you could feel the sporadicness and the last beat. You could feel the last beat, and I knew he was gone. So.
And what day was that?
It was May 17th at 6:34 p.m.
And what year?
2021.
Okay. So 2 years ago. 2 years ago. It's coming up 2 years.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you for describing that whole process. And, the process doesn't end on that moment.
Yeah.
And then we begin a new phase of our love with that person. And how would you describe what you went through, the next few days, and then obviously now 2 years later?
Gosh, for me, it's like an out-of-body experience. That's the only way I can explain it, because it's like you're there, you're grieving, you don't know what to. I just totally lost that ability to take control of everything, which you were doing. I don't know if I was just so mentally, physically exhausted that I just kind of, you're watching you do things from afar, and it's like you can communicate, but you can't. It's just it was a weird situation. It was just, I had to let people take over and help me get through the next, through the next 24, because I just was beyond.
Well, I imagine there were lots of people that loved you, loved Gary, and were trying to console you. I guess one question I have, just seeing it different ways, did you feel like it was your job, now that Gary was gone, to continue to console everyone else, or were you able to?
I couldn't.
Were you able to soak up the love from people that were coming to express their love for you?
Well, it basically was just family, but I couldn't physically console people, because I just was not. I just couldn't. I so needed the consoling. I just needed that. And I was very grateful that I allowed these people, just like I said, just to take me literally by the hand and move me and hug me and just take me home, put me to bed,
And I
and
would
care for me.
imagine that in the hospice facility, you've got the whole professional hospital staff, hospice staff
Mhm.
that I would assume provided you a great deal of support, guidance, and also just get done all of those practical things that have to happen when someone dies.
That my son and his brother took that over, and they did all the decision making because I couldn't do the decision making.
Mhm.
I couldn't. My mind couldn't do it. It literally couldn't do it.
Mhm.
It was turned off.
So when did you wake up?
Pretty much the next day after I slept, and I got up, and yeah, my mind didn't have that complete fog, the
Mhm.
complete sure I just need a distance from everything. And so the sleep was good. It turned my brain off and it healed a little bit. I guess healed
Mhm.
my brain a little bit.
Okay.
So I was able to say, okay, what is it that I need to do today? What is it that I missed? I knew things were going on, but tell me what you did. Tell me what I need to do. So yes, you just kind of, you carry on from then.
And over the next week, how did what sort of a burden were you wearing? What sort of were you finding moments of joy in interacting with family and friends that were coming? Were you feeling like you needed to be dressed in black?
No.
And
Gary is always a big believer when upon my passing, if we can have celebration of life and cookies for everybody, life is good. So that's the way he was. So and I'm pretty much, I love life. So in honor of him, it was like, okay, we've got to do this. Well, we've got to put together a celebration of life. How can we make this
but
a
like
happy?
on day 1, 2, or
happy.
3, are you bringing
Well,
out
that's
the
still
clown
COVID.
suit and
No. I was still trying to figure out my grieving process. I was still trying to figure out my next step, because it literally was you had to put one foot in front of the other and feel like you're going to make it through the rest of the day.
How many weeks do you think that was your modus operandi? Just need to know what I'm going to do in the next second and just keep putting one foot in front of the other.
Probably at least a good week, if not a couple weeks. And we were still, everybody had a mask and you were still, distancing and things like that. So that made it, I think, a little bit more challenging, because people can come give you hugs, and I'm a huge hugger. It's like, bring it in, I'll give you one, you give me one. But so I think because of that, it probably for me took me longer to get to that point where I'm like, okay, I know that I can get through this day. I'm ready to carry on. I'm fully capable of making my new journey, whatever that journey
Was
is.
there a period of time in those weeks or even months after Gary's death where you would just speak with him as if you thought he was there, or did you ever see him across the street or in another car, or did you ever any experiences like that?
I always talked. I'm a talker. So whether I felt he was there or not, I still talked, because it was just he and I, and it's deathly silence, without that other person. But I would always talk. He never ever came to me, like people would always talk, oh, I had a dream about him. I'm like, well, why do you get to do that? Rats, but I never ever had that dream where I knew for sure he was there and I saw him. But I had dreams where, this may sound a little strange, but I knew he was present, but I didn't visually see him, but I knew he was present.
When was the first time after his death that you felt unadulterated joy?
Oh. Oh, wow. It's, this might I don't know if I've ever gotten to that unadulterated joy, because joy changes.
There's always still a bittersweetness because every joy you experience
It's
now,
different.
you recognize that there's somebody missing that.
Yes.
What about you
Yes.
with your grandkids?
They're always, I mean, they're the ones that I always have, they're
Mm.
my saviors. They're the
Mhm.
ones that make me giggle and laugh, which I need. I truly need. And I get joy. I do. I mean, people bring me joy and I bring people joy. It's just different.
Mhm.
It's different. And it may sound like that's a broad explanation, but that's the only
Yeah.
way I can describe it after a loss.
So there's a beautiful article that has been written. It's in Lucy Palikirthy's epilogue to her husband's book, When Breath Becomes Air. And she talks about the love that she has for her husband even after he's gone. That she thought, okay, my husband was going to die. Well, that's over with. And there would only be memories. But she describes having a persistent, real presence of love that's still in her life.
Oh, yeah.
Would you describe it that way?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that it's not gone, it's still there.
It's still there. Absolutely. And that is the absolute truth. I think anybody who passes on, you will never ever lose their love. And I think it stays with you and it presents in different ways too. All different ways. And it may be some words that you've seen, or it may be a visual, or it may be the feeling of the little presence of them there. But you will never, ever, ever, ever lose that love.
So you're doing as part of healing, but also part of tribute, part of trying to make sure that Gary's life was still being remembered, to celebrate his life in a way that helps other people. So you have created this bicycle ride that has several purposes. I mean, one, keep Gary's spirit alive and provide a party for his friends to come back, and all sorts of reasons to remember stories, and but also, well, why don't you tell me what was it that made you decide that you wanted to do something and what is your goal in having this event?
I realized pretty much the day after, and when he passed, that I needed to do something, because cancer, no matter what cancer it is, it just stinks, literally. But to have somebody let you know that you have a very short time on this earth is, to me, unexcusable. And I think that needed to be changed. So I knew I needed to do something. I just didn't know how to make that change and make that happen, or what it was going to be like. And then I just started getting back and talked with Dr. Collartier a little bit. And somehow I got connected with Joan from Mercy One Des Moines Foundation. And she just started sparking this thoughts of, you really should start forming a nonprofit organization and doing something with it, because you want to do something good. And then it just started to develop. I knew Gary loved to ride, but I wanted to make sure that whatever time's left for these individuals that are diagnosed with glioblastoma, that their quality of life that they have left is going to be the best that they can have, that they can share, not with their family, with their friends. And whether it be through, and we figured out these different areas, a lot of them get so stressed out because financially you just can't afford things. You run out, out of pocket, you hit that and you don't have any money left to provide that for them. And then all these other ideas came where a lot of people find benefit from massages and art therapy. What's going to help them feel alive, as much as alive as they possibly can? Acupuncture, or, like you talked about that. And that's why I popped in. That's what made me think, okay, we want to do this. Occupational therapy, speech therapy, anything that's going to help enhance that quality of life. But also, if that person is able to go out and do something that they've always wanted to do, let's do that for them, because that's going to give them that. Maybe that's their last hurrah, and it probably is their last hurrah, but it's giving them that quality of life. So that just is something that's so important to me, because there's not a cure yet. I don't know if it's going to happen in our lifetime.
Mm.
I know they're working hard at trying to figure things out, but this cancer is so aggressive and it mutates so much that I don't know. So what can we do right now at this moment in time?
So your goal was to help, number one, remember Gary.
Yes.
Create an event that Gary would appreciate because
Yes.
it's got fun and it's got activity.
Yes.
But also to raise money that could then be used to help others that are going through
Yes.
Gary's journey.
Yes.
And that's what now has become Gary's
Gary's
Ride.
Ride.
And so you see the logo
there it
there.
is,
Did
yeah.
you create the image?
My incredible brother-in-law, Neil Monsager, is an exceptional artist. And that the little person with the purple head on, that's Gary.
With the wings,
With the
angel
wings.
Yeah, that's
and
Gary.
so he was always, people always say, oh, we want to be behind Gary because he's such a tall guy. I would always ride behind him and I would love it.
Yes, you want to draft behind
I want to draft
Gary.
behind that guy because I can't feel the wind. Praise the Lord, you know. And so that's Gary in the league, you know, helping out all his other fellow
he's in
riders
the lead.
behind him.
People are drafting behind Gary.
Yes, yeah. So so Neil made that, and that just became our wonderful logo for our Gary's Ride.
Good. So it says Gary's Ride, beat brain cancer, get on your bikes and ride.
He loved that. There's Queen has that one song. What is it? But it has a part of it. Get on your bikes and ride. Fat Bottom Girls. Is that the name of it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was one of his. He always had these
Bicycle.
inspirational songs he would have while he was biking, and that was one of them. And he would always say that, you know, get on your bikes and ride. So
tell us a little bit about Gary's Ride this year.
Yes.
When is it? Where is it?
Okay. It's May 20th. You don't have to ride. So anybody who doesn't really enjoy riding but still likes to have fun, you don't have to ride. It's May 20th on this Saturday. It will always be the third Saturday of every May. So no matter what, it starts at 10 a.m. It starts at the Waukee Raccoon River Valley Trailhead. So that is on the if you guys don't know where that is, that's on the very west part of Waukee. And it's got this beautiful trail cover over it. And that's where the trail starts. And you've got different distances you can go. So you can go 6 miles, 18 miles, or 32 miles, or not ride at all and just end up at the Dallas Center Handlebar because that's where everything ends.
And it's in the Handlebar.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a Handlebar restaurant. And they'll have food and beverage there. There's going to be beer, liquor, wine vendors. There's going to be massage therapists there. There's going to be...
Will Queen be playing?
Queen will not be playing. The person who doesn't even sound like him, it sounds like more like Chris Stapleton.
Okay.
His name's Paul Little. He'll be playing there.
Okay.
So yeah, wouldn't that be a joy? He'd come down from heaven on that one. That would be great. We could rock and roll.
Great. So again, that's May 20th,
yes, May 20th.
10 a.m. And that's the trailhead. That's the west side of Waukee.
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then several different options for rides and a gathering and celebration at the Handlebar Bar and Grill in Dallas Center, Iowa.
Yeah. Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah. It'll be fun.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. If it's okay with you, let's open it up to some questions.
Yeah.
We got about 10 minutes here and maybe talk about grief and how one's life goes on after losing a loved one.
You can ask me any question.
Here we go.
Well, the first question that comes to mind, you've probably been asked this a lot. I mean, in retrospect now, would you go through the same process the same way again? The decision that had to be made and the journey that you traveled, is this the one that you would choose now?
I had this, and I had this was a discussion I had with Gary in heaven, so to speak. I said, if I had to do my life all over, if that's what you're in reference to, and we ended up being with Gary, I would go through it again in a heartbeat, go through the same thing, even knowing how it's going to end. But hopefully if that ever happened, they'd have cures by then, so you wouldn't have to deal with that. But I would do it all over in a heartbeat.
What about the medical part of the treatment?
Yes, because right now, that's the only thing that they've got to help slow it down. If you're able to get through that surgery, and do the radiation chemotherapy, absolutely. Because the more time you get with your loved one, yes.
Angelina.
I have a question about it. It's interesting with this cancer in the brain because my brother had cancer he had a benign tumor And so I understood what you were talking about.
Yeah.
They can't take everything out because then it starts to affect. And he's dealing with no, not Alzheimer's. No. My husband's there trying to help me out. No, he has Parkinson's
Oh,
as well. So,
Okay.
so I understand a little bit. I mean, it's interesting. The doctor had said to my brother that trying to get a tumor out that is benign is just as challenging.
yes.
And so they've had to probably talk through steps and things like that. I mean, he's surviving, but he's got a lot of obstacles. And I think that half his brain is shrunk too, as well. So it's a lot to digest. And so, but my question was, is that when you talked about the symptoms that he was, did it come all of a sudden?
Mhm.
Was there a moment that maybe you might have thought to yourself, did we miss some signs that could you have caught it earlier? Or
No,
no?
no,
No.
no. And the symptoms are different depending on where that tumor is in the brain. But no, they usually, most of them will say they end up having headaches,
Mhm.
or people will have seizures. But for Gary, that wasn't the case. He just one day just said, Kristen, I can't read this, and that was it. So no, there was nothing that would say, hey, something's really bad going on.
And Kristen, in addition to this ride that you've created, what else have you incorporated in your life to keep Gary's memory and presence alive?
Well, we have his birthday, birthday celebrations. We still include him, and celebrate his birthday. Or it's basically I have Christmas time, we hang up the stockings, or when anniversary comes, I do a card, for him, things that will just keep him ever present. And just always having conversations. His friends have been really good. You keep in contact with his friends, and through their stories, that keeps him alive.
Right.
So I always make sure that we talk about him, so people don't feel uncomfortable, first of all, because people feel sometimes like, do I bring up, Gary, or do I not? I'm like, oh, talk all you want, bring it on. So
And Gary's family has remained part of your
Yes.
family,
which has been wonderful, because they're my Gary, they're my extended Gary, and that is so helpful for me.
Well, thank you for sharing this. A beautiful line from Wallace Stegner, and I shall be richer all my life for this sorrow. That the difficult things we go through with individuals we love, it just amplifies the love.
And there's one thing I'll share too, if I can, real quickly, because this has really helped me, and this has helped a lot of other people when they grieve, because they talk about, well, how long, should I grieve? What's appropriate? What's not appropriate? And, I think the biggest thing that people understand, you're going to grieve. You're going to grieve for the rest of your existence, because grief never, ever, it won't ever lessen. But what you do learn is that you learn how to grow around that grief. You learn how to find your own path. You learn your journey, your joys, what your purpose is for your own life that you now have. You will learn it, but you will never, ever lose that grief. You just won't.
Yeah, it's part of you.
It is part of you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you, everyone, for attending. If you know someone that would benefit by listening to this podcast or watching this video podcast, this will be available on demand tomorrow at the Above and Beyond Cancer YouTube channel. It will also be available at the Mercy One Cancer Center website. So please share this and come join us on May 20th. And please join us again next week for our next week's Cancer Education Series. Thanks, everyone.